Today we're moving through a root chakra sequence, and as we move through the sequence, we're focusing on the contact between our body and the ground to help us feel more grounded. We are starting the sequence in child's pose. And as you get into this pose, pay close attention to the contact between your hands, forearms, your forehead, knees, front of your shins, and tops of your feet with the ground. You can take a break from child's pose, coming into on all fours, placing your hands under your shoulders and knees under your hips, and curling your back up and down to find the neutral spine. And you can stay in a tabletop position or come back to child's pose. Again, paying attention to the contact of our body with the ground. And whenever you're ready, come back into a table stop and bring your left foot forward into a low lunge. You can keep your hands up or you can keep them at the heart, whatever works for you today. You can stay here or you can lean forward by bending your left knee more and stretching through the front of your right thigh or hip, those hip flexor muscles, while keeping your hands up or at the heart, and stay here for a few breaths. As you breathe out, we're moving into a half split by bringing hips back and straightening out left knee, keeping it soft but not locked, and pointing the left toes up. And basically our trunk is about straight line, hinging at the hips over our left leg. So staying here for a few breaths. And once you're ready, we're gonna be moving through low lunge and back into a half split, about 3 times on each side. So as you breathe out, move back into a low lunge by bringing your hips forward and come back into a half split. And once you complete the third half split, stay in that position for a few breaths. And once you complete that, we're moving back into a child's pose for a short break. Switch to the other side whenever you're ready. So first, going into a low lunge for a couple of breaths. Keeping your arms up or at the heart. You can go deeper by bending right knee more and stretching the front of the left hip and stay there or remain in a low lunge. Then moving your hips back and straightening out right knee, keeping it soft, right toes pointing up into a half split for a couple of breaths. As you breathe out, move through the sequence of coming back into a low lunge and then flowing into a half split about 3 times. And once you complete that, stay in a half split for a few breaths on the right side. And once that's completed, come back into a child's pose for a break. After you take a break in child's pose, we're moving into a downward dog by moving to tabletop, tucking our toes, and bringing our hips up high to the sky. And stay in here for a few breaths. You can pedal your feet, move your head as if you're saying no or saying yes, or just stay in that pose and find stillness. And on your next breathing out, lift your heels up and bend your knees. And this is the position from which we're walking forward towards our hands, taking small steps. Coming into a forward fold. Moving side to side, grabbing your elbows, and just letting your head hang down. And keep breathing. Coming up as you breathe in, bring arms to the heart, staying in this position, taking a few breaths, paying attention to the contact with the ground with the feet. And as you breathe out, bring arms up and then diving into a forward fold, hinging at the hips, putting hands on the ground and stepping back into a high plank. So we're going to move through sun salutations. There is a couple of variations I'll go over. For the first one, put the knees down on the floor and keep your hands under your shoulders with your head, trunk, and thighs in a straight line. Lower down to about 1 inch of the ground, 1 inch between chest and the ground, by bending your elbows. And as you breathe in, open up your chest, bring your head up into a baby cobra. And stay here for a couple of breaths. And as you breathe out, move into a tabletop. And then into a downward dog. So this is the one variation of the flow. And next we're gonna go over another variation of that sun salutation flow. So heels up, knees bent, and you move into a forward fold again. Staying here for a couple of breaths. Then bringing arms up as you breathe in. And as you breathe out, hands to heart, breathe in, forward fold, step back into a high plank. So basically from high plank, we're lowering our body in a straight line, head, trunk, and legs in a straight line, lowering it down to about 4 inch away from the ground by bending elbows backwards. And from this position, basically opening up chest forward, bringing head up, bringing hips down, and then placing the tops of feet down such that your whole body is off the ground except for your hands and for the tops of your feet. Into an upward dog. Staying here for a couple of breaths. And as you breathe out, basically coming up on your toes, so tuck your toes, bring hips up into a downward dog, where you can take a small break before you perform about 3 more cycles of either variation of the sun salutation flow, whichever one feels good for today. And instead of stepping forward, you can actually hop forward from high plank to forward fold. So do it about 2-3 times, moving with your breath. And once you're done, we're meeting in downward dog. Or you can move into a child's pose for some break instead of a downward dog and remain there. But we're meeting in a downward dog. And once you're ready, move to tabletop, tuck your toes in, and come back into a downward dog. For our next pose, basically lift your heels, bend your knees, and step or hop forward into a forward fold, halfway lift, and then back down to forward fold. And bring your hips down, arms up and trunk up, hands at heart or hands up into a chair pose and stay there for a couple of breaths. Paying attention to the contact of our feet with the ground to help us feel grounded. Try and keep your hips as low as possible. Make sure your heart is above your hips. And once you're ready, breathe out and move into a forward fold, high plank, and go through your preference of variation of sun salutation flow that it works for you today. Stay in downward dog for a couple of breaths. Once ready, lift your left leg up, bring it to your heart, step forward, and come up into a high lunge or warrior one position with your back foot about 45 degrees angle and a left knee bent to about 90 degrees. Stay here for a couple of breaths. And as you move through the warrior sequence, pay attention to the contact of feet with the ground. Open up to the right side, look forward into a warrior two, and stay here for a couple of breaths. Lean forward, bring your left arm up, right back, right arm down into a reverse warrior. Look up and stay here for a couple of breaths. Come back into warrior two position. Elongate through your spine, reach forward. Bring your left arm down, right arm up. Uh, while also straightening out your legs, you might want to shorten your stance into a triangle pose, keeping your trunk as straight as possible and hinging at the hips. And stay here for a couple of breaths. As we prepare for the next pose, tighten up your tummy, bring your trunk up, bring your feet facing forward. Feet can be angled out a bit, arms in a cactus position, 90 degrees angle elbow band, and upper arms at shoulder height, squatting down into a goddess pose. And staying here for a couple of breaths, paying attention to the contact of our feet with the ground. On your next breathe out, come up by straightening out your knees, place your hands beside your right foot, step back into a high plank, and go through your variation of flow for today. Meeting in downward dog, taking a break before we move to the other side. You can also come down into a child's pose for a few breaths. And as you take a small break in child's pose, whenever you're ready, tuck your toes in and come up into downward dog. Lift the right leg up, bring it towards your chest, and step forward, coming up into a um, warrior one. Staying here for a couple of breaths. Once again, paying attention to the contact of your feet with the ground as you move through this warrior sequence on the side. As you breathe out, open up to the left side, arms reach into the sides, looking forward towards your right arm. And warrior two, stand here for a couple of breaths. Reaching forward and leaning back into a reverse warrior, looking up, staying here for a couple of breaths. As you breathe out, straightening out legs, you may shorten your stance if needed. Hinging at the hips, bring your trunk forward, bring your right arm down, left arm up into a triangle pose and staying here for a couple of breaths. As you breathe out, tightening your tummy, coming up into warrior two, and then standing in a wide stance with feet angled out, hands in cactus position, and squatting down into a goddess pose and staying here for a couple of breaths. As you breathe out, coming up and placing your hands on each side of the right foot, coming into a high plank, moving through your variation of flow for today, and meeting in downward dog. You can also take a break in child's pose and then come back into downward dog for us to get ready for our practicing tree pose. For the tree pose, lift your heels, bend your knees, step or hop forward into a forward fold. Come up, hands to heart, and let's get into a tree pose by transferring all the weight onto one foot. Left one, for example, lifting the right leg up and placing the right foot either on shin, knee, or thigh, whatever feels good today, and keeping your hands at heart or opening them up to the sky, just like the trees open their leaves to the sunlight. Staying here for a few breaths. As you stay in this pose, make sure the right foot does not push against your left knee to prevent any injuries, and open up your hip forward. As you breathe out, switch sides and stay here for a few breaths. Once you're done with this side, you can come out of pose, shake your legs, and come back down into the mat into a sitting pose. First, we're going to do a seated forward fold. You can just stay seated with your trunk upright, your legs straight, knees straight, but not locked soft. You can use your hands to walk yourself forward, hinging through the hips, bending your trunk, and stay here for several breaths, about 5 to 10. As you breathe out, come up and lay down on your back to prepare for our bridge pose. Feet flat on the floor, as close as possible to the sit bones. And as you're ready, breathe in and breathe out and lift your hips up high as far as you can. You can and bring shoulders together. You can clasp your hands together or put them on your sides and stay here for about 5 to 10 breaths. Paying attention to the contact of your body with the ground to help us feel more grounded. And as you breathe out, come down onto the mat into a final corpse pose and stay here for as long as needed. Again, paying attention to the contact of your body with the ground to help promote that feeling of groundedness. Stay here for as long as needed and come up on your side whenever you're ready to finish your practice today. Namaste.